Prepare to unshackle your mind.
An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
Your professor has arrived. Tom Woods. Beware, citizen. You are now departing from the world of allowable opinion. The Tom Woods Show.
And welcome, everybody, on this Wednesday, October 23rd, 2013. Tom Woods here, talking recycling today. Now, I realize this is not the most pressing issue in the history of mankind, but it is the sort of classic example of a government program that is supported by propaganda alone, that your kids are propagandized into believing, and they come home and lecture you for not recycling. An enormous amount of money is spent on it by cities all over the country, and what does it have to show for itself? Does it make any sense whatsoever? So we're going to talk about this once, and then we'll never have to mention it again. We're going to have a good time doing it, because we'll be joined by my old friend Floy Lilly, Dr. Floy Lilly from the Mises Institute. I'll introduce her to you in just a few minutes. The other day, there was a piece in Salon. Some of you probably saw this, by a guy named Tom Watson. And by the way, this has nothing to do with recycling. We're officially into my opening banter now. Tom Watson had this piece on Salon. I blogged a little bit about it on tomwoods.com, my personal site. And what he was saying is that his fellow progressives should steer clear of libertarians when working against NSA spying. Now, we don't want these bad old libertarians in our coalition. Look at all these terrible things they believe. And then it's the usual laundry list of 7th grade level complaints. And it shows the sort of 7th grade level analysis that we expect at Salon. No attempt to understand why libertarians think what they think, or to understand it at any level other than everyone would be starving. Oh, yeah, at least we understand what the progressives believe, right? We try to make some effort to understand them and say that at least some of what they believe, they're just doing the wrong thing to get there. Other things they believe are just outright wrong, but there are some things they believe they're just using the wrong means to reach their ends. So at least we make some effort. There's no effort whatsoever, no intellectual curiosity whatsoever about libertarians. They must just be people who gratuitously love to reward rich people. Additionally, in addition to what they're already getting in money, they get additional esteem from the libertarians who just love and worship them. That's about the level of the analysis. So how about that? I would rather be spied on by the NSA than collaborate with a libertarian. Now, if that weren't such a clunky saying, you could put that on a T-shirt. I'd rather be spied on by the NSA would be at the top, and then at the bottom, then work with a libertarian. Well, how about that? So there you have it. That's where the progressives are. And yet, meanwhile, I see so many libertarians who are talking about it'd be wonderful to reach out to the left, reach out to progressives, and wouldn't that be fantastic? Because then, instead of just demonizing each other, maybe for once we could try and view each other as human beings and not think of one side as having devil horns and the other as having angel's wings. That maybe in the ultimate scheme of things, we are just human beings trying our best to make our way through the world and solve problems. Maybe there was some chance that for 10 seconds we could meet these people on common ground. Then you get a guy like Tom Watson. No way, man. Spy on me all you want, but I ain't working with no libertarians. So that's that. Remember, coming up soon, I've got chit-chats with Kane, the professional wrestler. You all know Kane, with 8 gazillion Facebook likes. Super well-known and super loved. Kane will be on this program. I want to know what would you guys like me to ask him. So I've already started up a Facebook thread on this, so get your 2 cents in over there. Make sure and follow me on Facebook, or like my page, that is to say, on Facebook. Don't look for me as Tom Woods on Facebook. That's my personal page, and I have too many friends on it. They won't let me add any more. So you want to look for my real page, which is facebook.com/Thomas E. Woods, or just go to tomwoodsradio.com or tomwoods.com and click on like on the Facebook widget, and you can jump in on that thread as well. If you're a Twitter person, you can tweet your questions to me at Thomas E. Woods and maybe hashtag Ask Kane, and do the same thing for Ron Paul. I haven't opened up a thread on Facebook on that just yet, but over on Twitter, send me some questions for Ron Paul with hashtag AskRonPaul at Thomas E. Woods. And I'm going to ask him some interesting things. They're not going to be nasty. We can ask some challenging questions, but no nasty questions. Right now, I'm very glad to welcome to the program my old friend Floy Lilly. Dr. Floy Lilly is an adjunct scholar of the Mises Institute, where she is in residence. She's formerly the chair of free enterprise at the University of Texas at Austin. She's been an attorney at law in Texas and Florida, and she is the producer and director of The Lou Rockwell Show, the Lou Rockwell podcast, which you can also subscribe to on iTunes, the same way you can subscribe to this here program on iTunes, and I always appreciate when you guys do that. As some of you know, I myself was a resident scholar at the Mises Institute for 4 years, and a couple of the summers that I've come back to spend some time at the Mises Institute, I've had an office right next to Floy, so it's a great pleasure to be able to talk to Floy. So, Floy Lilly, thanks for being with me today.
It's great to be here.
Now, Floy, you gave this talk years ago at the Mises Institute at an event where several of us spoke, and I just never forgot it. It was on recycling. And I think recycling is one of these things that people who are informed, reasonably informed, kind of know deep down that it's a scam and it's a waste of time and resources and we shouldn't bother with it. But I think if hard-pressed, a lot of people wouldn't really be able to give a lot of hard evidence one way or the other. You, however, are different. As I indicated in the introduction, you have quite a bit of knowledge in this area. So suppose a recycling propagandist came to your door. Here, Floy, we've got these wonderful new recycling bins here for you, and this is really going to help the environment. Now, suppose you were in a particularly foul mood. What would you say to this person?
Well, what exactly are you paying me for?
Okay.
They'll say, well, I'm not paying you. It's going to cost you to do that. And then I would have to say, well, then whatever it is you want me to put into this wheelie bin should not be there because it's not a useful resource to humans. If it were, you would be here at my door saying, have you got any aluminum cans? Can I buy them? Have you got some craft cardboard? Can I buy it? Have you got some metals? How about hubcaps? Anything? Can I buy them? Because when something, we've been recycling forever. I mean, not so many generations ago, essentially, Tom, the only thing in a rubbish dump, the only thing in the pile at all was broken pottery, shards of glass, because absolutely everything else had a useful life in some other way. The rags, all of that. The rag pickers picked them up. All of that had a useful life. And as long as they did, they were recycled. And recycling has a marvelous function in the market itself when it's part of the free market. And everything that can be useful to man is picked up from anything that people dispose of and reused. Now, if it is not useful to man, then they send around bozos with green and tan and blue and red and yellow wheelie bins and have to mandate, no free market there, mandate at the force of fines or imprisonment that you do something not natural. Now, why do you go along with that? Why do you do it? Why do we have 2, 3, 4, and 5 wheelie bins cluttering up our alleyways and make it an obstacle to try to even get in the door? Well, I truly believe we only do that because it's been sold to us as kind of a full-time religion. And I mean, after all, but now they don't believe in virgin births. They don't want any virgin materials used, like sand to make glass and hydrocarbons to make plastics. But they do seem to believe in quasi-resurrections, I'll call it.
All right, but let me jump in here. I mean, suppose they could come back and say, all right, look, Dr. Lilly, you got us. I mean, we really don't, frankly, care that much about human welfare and efficiency. What we really care about is trying to keep the landfills from overflowing. And sure, it might cost rather than showering benefits on mankind immediately. Yes, we might indeed be expending funds, but we have to do this. Otherwise, we're going to get poison in our well water, or we're going to have garbage overflowing everywhere, and certainly you don't want that.
Well, so I'm hearing you say, Tom, or man at my back door, that you think we've run out of landfill space, essentially.
I think the general public thinks so.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, that could be. I mean, if we act so crazy about it, like you must recycle, then it must be that we don't have any landfill space. But, I mean, what are the facts about that? And some of the facts are that all the garbage for the next 100 years in America can fit into a space that's 255 feet deep or high and only 10 miles down a side. All of the garbage in the U.S. So that's not taking up a huge amount of space. And then, don't we know, or maybe we don't know, we should know that landfills aren't the same old landfills that they originally were. Today they have anti-leach bottoms to them. They have containers. They have tops. Some of them are even turned over like compost. And they're now energy-producing plants, like the large waste management company is the largest waste manager in the country. Anyway, most of his landfills now are energy-producing plants. They produce methane, and some of them now, in 2013, he's got many of them now producing natural gas. Well, that is extraordinary. And some of those plants of waste management companies are now feeding electricity for 700,000 just U.S. homes. When a landfill is finally through creating this energy, essentially, then its useful end life is simply usually one as a park. But we're not running out of landfill space. I do understand how that mainly came about by that silly garbage barge that indicated that it couldn't find a place to land going up and down the East Coast, and then there was a bureaucrat who made hay out of that, saying, oh, we've run out of landfill, this is horrible. But none of that is true. And the landfills today take up most of our garbage, including most of which we recycle. So we're recycling, and yet it's going into the landfill anyway. So we're not running out of landfill space.
All right, so then if it's not a matter of we have to conserve landfill space, and any of the other claims that they make seem to be false, and I guess you've sort of indicated that there's something at work here other than dispassionate science going on, is there anything in the recycling mantra that we hear that makes any sense? Because sometimes you'll hear even free market people say, well, sure, it's silly to be recycling glass bottles and plastic, this and that, but the aluminum can, it does make sense to recycle the aluminum can. So how do I sort that out, so to speak, and make sense of that?
Well, when somebody's willing to pay you for it, that's when it makes sense. So those things will still exist, and those things are the metals for the most part. Some plastic, but not much. Now, what's happened today is that paper is, and especially old newspaper, is old news. We're not using paper as much as we were even 4 and 5 years ago. So books and newspapers, they're worthless. They're not to be recycled at all. Mainly because if you've got print on any of that, you've got to use chemical bath to get the print off of it, and that's even more chemicals and even more waste. So books and newspapers shouldn't be recycled at all. Glass is insignificant and shouldn't be recycled. Just the card, the heavy craft cardboard, metal, and some plastics ought to dominate. Landfill mining will take place, and they'll be landfill resource companies, and it won't be seen as waste at all. They'll know what's in there, and they'll mine back through it when they need it. But China stopped buying our waste. They stopped buying all our recycled stuff. Almost now 9 years ago. And during this economic depression that we're in right now, Tom, when times are real tough, there's less garbage. So there isn't as much garbage going into any of either the recycle bins or the landfills.
But I think it might be hard for the average person to see why it would be wasteful to take, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here,
sure,
to take a glass bottle and not recycle it. Surely it would be easier to clean an old glass bottle than to create a brand new one.
Well, wish away, but it's not. Mainly because most glass is not just clear glass. It's got much of the glass is mixed and it's colored, and the whole crunching of it, the whole trying to get it back down to its sand, all it is silica dioxide. That's sand. We've got plenty of sand. So there is something that ought to be a virgin birth. We need to just recreate glass out of the sand. And the same is true with plastic. Plastic is just from petroleum byproducts. And to try to separate plastics or recycle them is a very expensive product and process. So recycling for all glass and paper, paper, of course, is just a harvest. Trees are grown to be harvested to be paper. And you don't save any trees by trying to recycle paper at all. But then sometimes they get away with themselves essentially by banning some product and then essentially leaving you with nothing to do with it. And they did that in the case of incandescent light bulbs. And back in 2007, they banned those nice lights that we like to use and said that we had to go using those compact fluorescent lights instead. And this ban was not a market choice at all. It was just, once again, by the possibility of a gun to your head, that you're going to use compact fluorescent lights because they're better for the environment. Well, once again, they were wrong about that. The compact fluorescent lights, every one of them has a little bit of mercury in it, and those are not to go into landfills at all, nor are they to be recycled. And that's a lot of just like what's happening now with what's called e-waste. And that's what the recycler's business is going to have to deal with from this point on, and that is the electronic waste. Pennsylvania has just passed a law that says you cannot put a TV, a computer, a printer, or any smaller electrical device in any landfill or even in a bin of any kind, or else. Well, or else what? So they're going to have to figure that out. Right now, they mainly want to say, well, it's going to have to be the manufacturer's responsibility to say what this product does from its entire life, from the existence to its own grave. And somebody will probably figure those things out. All of those have got a small bit of rare earths, they're called, that China has cornered the market on and has most of the rare earths. The U.S. doesn't have any that is being produced at this point. And those will be valuable. But it's pretty much thought, Tom, that recycling per se, by the year 2020, can't go any further in improving what it does, and that it will be limited to perhaps recycling about 50% of the municipal solid waste that has been recycled in the past.
Well, so if what you're telling us is true, and I have no reason to doubt it, then the argument from landfills is wrong. The argument from efficiency, it's more efficient to reuse something than to create a new one. Well, there could be certain situations in which something like that would be true, but then you would see that in the marketplace, as you say. Yes. So that's false. So, and I understand there could be some ideological reason that somebody might just want to impose burdens on mankind, but why would all these municipal governments latch on to this when it is so preposterous? And why do you think the general public, when the evidence is easily available to them, why do you think they just lemming-like go out there and sort all their garbage into these bins?
Well, this all started out in a slightly different time, and we felt we were all very much wealthier. And you can be really, truly green environmental when you feel wealthy and when you are wealthy. But with the collapse of the economy, people are not so wealthy. And so there is less garbage. There's less desire to do things that cost you time and money, that that essentially you don't believe in any longer. So California is trying to ban plastic bags, but it just got rejected. They're not in the mood for that. New York City is trying to ban styrofoam containers, and they might get away with it. Mayor Bloomberg seems to do all kinds of nanny state things, but they're being rejected. Now the Mayor Bloomberg is also saying you have to compost, meaning there has to be yet another wheelie bin in which you put your pizza scraps and the food stuffs that had been going into general landfill. And yet, watch what happens. I mean, not unlike this silly thing about the lights and the lamps. If they decide that you can't put food scraps or combustible stuff into landfills, well, then the landfill will not produce the gas that makes the landfill an operational process. It's got to have that food and that compostable stuff in order to burp. So.
But I just can't understand how. And I know I sound naive. You would think of all people in the world, Tom Woods, why would he be naive about things like this? Surely there's some nefarious thing. But I can't understand how, when this thing is so stupid and is indefensible on any conceivable ground. I mean, it would be like the government saying, all right, from now on, everybody's got to wear an orange shirt because that absorbs light better, and like some ridiculous claim, and everybody just does it. Like why are they getting so carried away? I mean, I understand that, yes, when you're wealthy, you can afford to do a lot of preposterous things, but you don't do everything you do isn't preposterous. Why this particular preposterous thing?
Well, it was sold to people, Tom, as we're going to save the planet. We're running out of trees. We've got to recycle. We'll run out of petroleum for plastic. We have to recycle. So it was sold to people as this is a prudent, a precautionary thing to do. And it was it was the huge picture of environmentalism as it came flooding into us in the 60s and the 70s. And environmentalism was humans are the cancer on the planet, and it's our responsibility as penance now to try to save the planet. So that was sold to everybody as this is a way for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to have a piece of the action of being part of saving the planet. It was something that everybody could do, could be made to want to do by rewards and really just communities, giving you medals for being the best recyclers and a city winning an award for saving the planet. And they all bought into that. It was the one environmental thing that absolutely every individual could be persuaded to do as a culture.
Okay, now I guess I can understand that. And I can also understand, I guess we didn't really hit on the claim that we're running out of X, we're running out of Y, and so you can't just throw it into the trash can. We need to recycle it because it's super precious. But that just comes back to the response that if it really were that valuable and that scarce, then you would not want to throw it away because you would be offered something for it precisely because it's scarce and because it's valuable. And if that's not happening, then you have nothing to worry about from a global point of view. All right, we have just a couple minutes left. I don't know if that's going to be enough time, but I did want to ask you keep up with the whole global warming crowd much more assiduously than I do. So you were telling me before we went on the air here that there have been some good developments, some favorable developments on the global warming front. What did you mean by that?
Well, I meant that I'll call it the age of climate alarmism is coming to an end. This whole global warming scare has just gotten so old, and people are so tired of it, and nobody's believing it any longer, and they shouldn't. And there's real information out now by a group called NIPSC. They're non-governmental, international panels on climate change, and they have a lot of their stuff. They have their stuff separately, but also their climate change reconsidered physical science information is up on heartland.org. And essentially, because there's been no rise in global temperature for 15 years, even with a 7% rise in carbon dioxide emissions, and the UN climate computer models were wrong about all that would be happening, and the hockey stick that Al Gore used to say, look at this alarming rise in temperature that's going to happen. Well, he'd left out an entire medieval warm period. And what happened now, the fifth assessment report from the United Nations has come out in this last week, and they are leaving the hockey stick out. They now know they can't get anybody to buy into the medieval warm period didn't exist. And there have been no increases in droughts or hurricanes or typhoons and other extreme record. And the human impact on any global temperatures has been a boon for flora and fauna and has been at best only 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. So the G20 group has even decided this year they're not even going to talk about climate change anymore. It's very old. I think that recycling and environmentalism, Tom, as hot issues, have now been eclipsed by the collapsing economies, the stuff that you talk about, the absence of free markets. Recycling and environmentalism both did play a role in our wealth destruction whenever they made us do things that did not make economic sense. So I think What we need to be doing right now is turning to the free markets with human ingenuity. We need to get the free markets to return to sound money. If we can free the market to stop our senseless and destructive war on carbon dioxide, our war on terror, our war on drugs, our war on poverty, we will be doing the intelligent and human thing. We need to create all the energy we can create. If we're going to recycle anything, we need to be recycling our nuclear fuel rods and using all of them rather than just 5% of them.
Well, Floy Lilly, I really appreciate your time. I knew you would knock this out of the park. I knew you would clear it up. Now, after this one program, everybody can just breathe a sigh of relief. Yes, my instincts were correct. I knew they were, and now I have the confirmation. I'll have you back sometime. Thanks, Floy.
Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.
All right, that's it for the show for today, ladies and gentlemen. If you are enjoying this program, help us keep the lights on in this office by making your Amazon purchases by going through TomWoodsRadio.com. The show site is TomWoodsRadio.com, and if you enter Amazon from there before you make any of your purchases, large or small, at no cost to you, you can help us keep the lights on in our little Tom Woods Show office. And don't forget, of course, to check out the most important work I've ever done, which is my website, LibertyClassroom.com, where you can learn the history and economics they didn't teach you. Talking about the fallacies of Keynes tomorrow. Don't miss it. See you then.
The Tom Woods Show.